We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast, May 15th. It's Friday, guys. Congratulations. You made it through the Monday through Friday grind. Almost. We are, after all, coming to you live at noontime. And unless you're a Fed, you're still going to have to put in a couple extra hours at the salt mines. But you're close nonetheless. And we're grateful to have you along with us today, because today it is Friday of Police Week. And in honor of that, we're going to do my favorite. We're going to drill down on some FBI press releases. It's going to be stuff about kidnapping and bank robbery and drugs and guns. And at the end, the FBI did nothing. It was all local police. And that's what we're going to hat tip today. We're going to give some helmet stickers, wave some pom-poms for the actual blue, the people that are out there laying it all on the line for their local communities. And we will be sure to acknowledge the work that they did, as opposed to what the FBI does, which is just steal credit. So let's get after it. And for the uninitiated, let me bring you up to speed, because this is an American Radicals Podcast tradition like no other, where I periodically will aggregate a whole bunch of press releases that are put out. They're publicly available via the internet, the interwebs, and also they're pumped up on social media, because all of the 56 field offices for the FBI have their own Twitter accounts, and they will put these out there. And I've become pretty adept at spotting them over the last couple of years, and I will collect them to the side and hold them in reserve, and then we'll do a whole big dump of like a dozen of them in an episode. And basically what happens is the FBI swoops in, steals credit from local law enforcement, and hopes that you don't actually read the details. We read the details here. They're not that hard. They're like 2 or 3 paragraphs in to all these Department of Justice press releases that come out from the various United States Attorney's Office. And let's begin, because I've got a bunch to get to today. From the District of Connecticut for the United States Attorney's Office, and it's a child exploitation case, but it's actually the other way, guys. It's a woman perpetrator. So the bad gal here, her name is Allison Kranick. Kranick first using text messages and Snapchat, and then using the internet chat service Discord, coerced an 11-year-old boy to sexually explicit conduct with her several times during the summer. Into the fall of 2022, Allison induced the minor victim to leave his house after midnight to meet up with her, and she sexually assaulted the minor victim during these rendezvous. So she was arrested on related state charges in November of 2023. Now, let's push pause. Let's make sure that we're tracking on our dates. She was seducing the 11-year-old via the internet, via text messages, we know, in 2022. So congratulations to the Christopher Wray FBI for all of the hard work you did then. Why are we announcing it now? She was arrested on state charges in 2023. That means local police handled it, because the FBI wasn't involved at all. And let's also weigh in on the one thing where the whole, it's a different thing for the male juvenile victim versus the female juvenile victim. No, it's not. I mean, I know it's a joke. Did you hear about the 13-year-old kid who was having sex with his teacher? Yeah, his hand fell off because he was getting so many high fives from his classmates. No. This little boy is a victim just as much as a little girl. And this woman manipulated him. And she found it from people, of all places, who went into it. Headline here, adjoining piece: school employee accused of sexually assaulting boy 11, giving bracelet saying, quote, best friends for life with benefits. And you have a nice picture of the face of evil of this teacher there. But again, she was arrested on state charges because a relative of the little boy reported the allegations to the FBI? No. Connecticut State Police in September. This is reported in November of 2023. The boy told the police that he had been in a sexual relationship with Allison Kranick during July and August of 2022. And then when asked by the police, she said that she's a really nice person, so please don't put me in the pokey. Well, she's going to the pokey, guys. And it's not because of the good work of the men and women at the FBI who are taking credit because she's been sentenced to 20 years per this press release. It's because of the Connecticut State Police. You had someone come forward, they interviewed the witness, they interviewed the victim, they did, I'm sure, a child advocacy center style interview with the victim here, this little boy who was 12 years old at the time, aggregated enough evidence to bring it to a judge and charge Allison Kranick with a state crime. And then while that was all going, the feds came in and said, hey, you've done all this work. We could probably get a harsher sentence because Connecticut tends to go soft on state crime. Why don't you just hand that file on up to us? We're the big bad FB1, Fat Boys Incorporated. We're happy to take that off your hands, which is exactly what they did. And now they're claiming credit for it. Okay, that was in Connecticut, so I believe that's the FBI Boston field office. Now we can go out to FBI St. Louis, which has a kidnapping to go into. So the headline of the press release here is two sentenced for kidnapping St. Louis County toddler. And this is pretty dark stuff. So our bad guys here are named Kendall White and Cameron Henderson. Cameron spelled C-A-M apostrophe R-O-N. All right. White believed, Kendall White, that the father of the 2-year-old who he wound up kidnapping had stolen some stuff from him. So he and Cameron went over to go and get it back. This was in 2023. Again, congratulations to the Christopher Wray FBI. White, Henderson, and a couple of others wound up booting in the door of this family where they think that the father of the 2-year-old might have stolen some stuff from them. And because the dad's not there, they take the 2-year-old. They pistol whip the mom and say, we're taking your toddler as some sort of ransom until you give us back what you owe us. When White and Henderson learned that there had been an Amber Alert issued, Amber Alert being, hey, kid is missing, kid is a runaway, kid has been kidnapped, because the mom, after being pistol whipped by Cameron and Kendall, said, I'm calling the police, not the FBI, 911, St. Louis County Police. They issue an Amber Alert. 2-year-old girl is missing. What are we going to do about it? Well, our two kidnappers said, we're in a world of trouble right now. And they wound up handing the little toddler off to a couple of girls and said, hey, turn her in because we don't want this heat on us. And then subsequently, as we find out from not the United States Attorney's Office in St. Louis, not the FBI's Twitter page, but actually the county police published a press release in August 2023. They gave us a little bit more details of how this entire thing was resolved. Defendant White was arrested in his home and found to possess a firearm and a mask that resembled the one he wore during the commission of the crime. Police arrested defendant Henderson at home and recovered a firearm. Henderson admitted to kicking in the door of the residence and doing the naughty stuff that he did because the county police not only issued the Amber Alert, they went forth and arrested the two bad guys in 2023. And then because it's a kidnapping, the feds came in after the fact, the FBI, and said, hey, now that there's no more danger, we're going to go ahead and charge it federally. And then when ultimately we get some big and heavy sentences, we will take credit for having interdicted a kidnapper from stealing a 2-year-old child. So hat tip, helmet sticker, pom-poms for the St. Louis County Police for having not only recovered the little girl, but then also put together all the facts, gathered the evidence necessary to get the arrest warrants for Cameron and Kendall, and then going out and getting them. And they had guns too. So they were dangerous offenders, putting their lives on the line, arrest these guys, and then FBI, as always, swoops in after the facts 3 years later, taking credit for the good work that they didn't do at all. Okay, well, let's go out now to California. The Eastern District of California, United States Attorney's Office. This is from FBI Sacramento, and it involves some child pornography, or as it's called in the industry, CSAM, child sexual abuse material, and some guns. The headline of the press release is Paroled Murderer Pleads Guilty to Possessing Child Sexual Abuse Material and Being a Felon in Possession of Ammunition. So our guy here, his name is Marvin Much. I mean, these are like comic book character names. Marvin Much May 2025, law enforcement officers, which means police, executed a search warrant at Mutch's residence. Inside his house, inside his home office, officers seized various electronic devices containing tens of thousands of depictions of sexual exploitation of children, because that's what pedophiles do. They don't just have like a dozen or 30 or 100, they have thousands of images of child pornography on their devices. So officers wound up collecting the devices, seizing them, doing an analysis. The kids on them were like 3, 4 years old, because he's a person who deserves to go feet first into the wood chipper so we can hear him scream. And they also found a ghost gun with some ammunition. Now, he's not supposed to have the ghost gun because he's a convicted felon, which makes it a federal crime, 922, 18 USC 922. But we're kind of short on information, because they say in the press release law enforcement. That might imply FBI. They are law enforcement. They carry guns and badges. Just ask FBI medium password strength Cash Patel. I mean, he arranged for himself to have a badge and a gun. It only required, I think, 20 attempts to qualify on the range with the pistol, and he got that badge issued to him right away. So I had to do a little bit of digging, though, to find out a little bit more about this guy. So CBS News, as we dig more into the FBI Sacramento arrest of Marvin Mutch. And here we find out that the Solano County Sheriff's Office said that they served a search warrant at Marvin Mutch's home. Detectives, meaning detectives from the sheriff's office, had recently gathered evidence that allegedly linked Marvin Mutch to possession of child sexual abuse material. Investigators also said that they had reason to believe he was in the possession of the drugs and loaded gun, and they went forth and executed the search warrant, wound up getting Marvin Mutch into custody. And then, now that there's no more danger, they looked around and said, we're in California, where lots of criminals go ollie oxen free. So we're happy to take this over to the FBI, and then they can charge it, because child sexual abuse material as a federal crime is incredibly punitive. I mean, if you are investigated for and eventually proven to have manufactured, now here we don't find any manufacturing, just possession, but just manufacturing one image of child pornography, you could be facing a 15-year prison sentence. Not a wood chipper, but 15 years. So it is in the best interest of many of these local jurisdictions, particularly in these communist enclaves like California or Connecticut, to say, hey, we did the yeoman's work, but this guy's going to get out in 6 months. I mean, he'll be charged and convicted and sentenced to, I don't know, like 12 months in prison, because it'll be a felony. But because it's overcrowded, they'll cut the sentence in half and good behavior, and all of a sudden he's back on the street in 4 months. Instead, let's take it to the feds. And the feds charge, and they get a hefty sentence. And then when they get that hefty sentence, you have to serve at least 85% of the time. So it's a really good thing. The question I always come out with is, why aren't we allowing the Solano County Sheriff's Office detectives who investigated this entire incident, this entire crime? They had gathered enough evidence to believe that the bad guy had child pornography and that he had guns. Why can't they go over to the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of California? What's stopping them? Nothing, nothing, except it's one big club and you ain't in it. It's a guild. Unless you have that federal designation, many of these United States Attorney's offices won't give you the time of day. They need to have that middleman there, that FBI agent who's got the tiny but shiny badge like Cash Patel, Director Medium Password Strength, has, so that that individual can go into a grand jury and testify to the facts that the detectives actually gathered. The FBI agent wasn't involved at all. They just physically took the file, like Office Space. What is it that you do here? Do you physically take the file? Well, not always. Sometimes my secretary does it, but occasionally I do. That's exactly what is happening here. We don't need it. And this is a high profile enough case for the FBI to not only get a press release from the Department of Justice, but to issue a tweet on FBI Sacramento claiming credit for this, because it looks really good. I mean, what was the headline there? Paroled murderer pleads guilty to possessing child sexual abuse material. Hey, man, that sounds damn sexy, doesn't it? Makes you look awesome. Makes you want to feel comfortable about going in front of Congress and saying, you gave us $11 billion last year. Why don't you give us 12? We just got a paroled murderer sent back to the pokey because he's a pedophile. No, they didn't. They weren't involved in it at all, other than physically taking the file. Okay. I want to now go down to New Orleans. FBI New Orleans press release from the Eastern District of Louisiana. We got some drugs and guns. Good old-fashioned bad guy. Press release headline, New Orleans man guilty of drug trafficking crimes and machine gun possession. Man, this is really sexy stuff. Our bad guy here, his name is Brandon Dunn, and he was arrested in May 2024. So again, congratulations, Christopher Wray. Your FBI was really killing it back in the day, wasn't it? Well, not so much, because here, Mr. Dunn was under surveillance by the FBI. No. New Orleans Police Department. New Orleans Police Department officers were surveilling Brandon Dunn. He arrived in a stolen car, exited the driver's seat. When Dunn saw the officers, he ran away and threw his Glock Model 19 9mm handgun, because the attorneys over at the United States Attorney's Office and the FBI agents just copied and pasted a police report, and his Glock 19, which is a 9mm handgun. They had to make sure to get all those really important details that don't matter to anybody else out there into this press release to beef it up, to make it look like they did an actual investigation. So Dunn sees the cops, tosses his pistol, goes on a run, and he winds up getting caught. They also wound up finding a machine gun conversion device. He dropped here in the pistol and some ammunition. He was apprehended, and they found some dope also on his possession and some other guns in his house. The entire investigation conducted by New Orleans Police Department, who, because they work their communities, had developed intelligence, information that Brandon Dunn was a bad guy, because they know who the regular usual suspects are. That's what good cops do. If something bad happens in community, the stop and rob, the convenience store gets knocked over, the cops know right away, half dozen people who it likely was, because of the recidivism, the repeat offenders. And it gets very territorial. I mean, I worked as a patrolman in a pretty small geographical area, because there was just so many people and so much crime. And I remember the beat that I rode, beat 31, precinct 3, Central Precinct, Savannah Police Department. I'd be riding my beat, and we had 2 stop and robs. I mean, and you're talking about a distance of maybe 600, 700 yards away from each other. It would take you a matter of a few minutes to walk there. But the regular cast of characters that we dealt with, the usual suspects, were so territorial that there was a time where one of these guys got stopped by police, and they found some contraband or something on him. And he gets arrested, and he goes to court. And the judge, who was hip to know the territories, when the defense attorney said, well, my client was walking to the store, she said, which store? And the attorney said, well, he was going to store A. And the judge kind of chuckled, shook her head, and he goes, no, he goes to store B. I know where he lives. He's not going to make that trek 600 yards. He's going to his regular store. I mean, that's how territorial it is. And the cops know all the usual suspects in any particular area. So they knew Brandon Dunn. They watched him, and they waited for him to roll up in a stolen car. And then they got a good pop out of it. They got guns, they got drugs, they got a stolen car, they got some money. And what credit did they get? We got a press release from the New Orleans, the Eastern District of Louisiana, and you get a tweet from FBI New Orleans about how they interdicted a drug trafficker and got him under arrest for a machine gun. No, they didn't. New Orleans police. Hat tip to you all. Okay, now let's go out to the Eastern District of Missouri. This is going to be a St. Louis case again. Man sentenced to 28 years in prison for sexual assault on grounds of Gateway Arch National Park. So the actual arch is where this happened. Your bad guy here, his name is Monty Darrell Boatman. Again, it's just weird comic book villain names. So Monty Boatman, December 6th, 2023. So now we're 2.5 years afterwards when he gets sentenced. That's just how long the wheels of justice take to turn. So he's from Illinois. He arrived via the Metro Link station at 5:15 p.m. He was captured on video passing the victim at a certain location at 5:19. So he gets off the train. 4 minutes later, he walks by the victim, eyes the victim, and says, "All right, I'm going to start following this woman." 10 minutes later, 5:30, he grabs the victim from behind and then forces her into the bushes with a razor and then does some unspeakable things to her. He was arrested 2 days later. So this happened December 6th, 2023. December 8th, 2023. He was arrested by the FBI. No. He was actually arrested by the National Park Service, the sworn law enforcement officers there. And they're feds. They have arrest powers. They're policing the area, making sure nothing bad happens, making sure nobody's putting graffiti out there or engaging in sexual assault of women in the bushes, right? The National Park Service police wound up being on the lookout. Hey, we had someone assaulted here. We have a description. Be on the lookout for this person. And they did. They found him. And one of the rangers wound up getting injured in fighting for this guy to get under arrest and apprehended. So we have an injured officer, not an FBI agent. And we're done here. He's guilty. And now he's been sentenced, rightfully so, to almost 3 decades in prison for what he did. And again, I'm led to the question, where is the FBI in this? Nowhere to be found? Exactly. Except at the very end, now that the danger's all gone and we're not going to get injured fighting this guy to put handcuffs on him, we can just take credit because it happened on a national park. It's a national crime. We'll prosecute it. Don't worry, Rangers. We can take it from here. Just hand us the file and we'll bring it on over to the federal courthouse. Okay. Next one. This comes from Indiana, Northern District of Indiana. Headline, Hammond man sentenced to 192 months in prison. Okay, this is FBI Indianapolis, but before we get to it, you should know if you don't already, 192 months. I mean, it's 16 years, but 192 sounds way better than 16, doesn't it? Which is why anytime there's a sentence that's under 20 years, if you read these press releases, the federal government loves to list it out in months. Now, the sentences are issued in months, but it's like learning metric. If you tell me how many kilometers something is or how many kilograms something weighs, I have no frame of reference for that, which is what they hope here. You hear 192. That's basically forever, unless you divide it by 12 and then realize that your bad guy is going to prison for 16 years. And why is he going to prison? The Hammond man, 192 months. His name is Jamal Sanders. So according to the documents in the case, February 2020, 6 years ago, law enforcement executed a search warrant at his house. That means police went on a search warrant. They recovered 5 guns, including a firearm that was stolen during a burglary earlier that day. So that means that a burglary happened. The police in Hammond developed a suspect and got a search warrant within 1 day. It took the federal government 6 years to get him sentenced for his crime, but the local police did this all probably within about 1 shift. Now, Mr. Jamal Sanders' criminal history revealed that he has prior felony convictions, which means that he's prohibited from actually having a firearm. And then what you should also know is that the 192 months was ordered to have 144 months of it, so 12 of the 16 years, to be served consecutive, and the other 4 years to be served concurrent with a sentence he was already serving. Because, guys, I left it out. The police developed evidence not of the burglary. They developed evidence of the rape he committed. He's a convicted rapist. So the local police got the search warrant because he's a rape suspect. That is not a federal crime unless it happens on a national park or an Indian reservation. And the local cops in Indiana investigated a sexual assault, got Mr. Sanders as identified as the subject, executed a search warrant, arrested him for the rape, and happened to find some guns when they were there, and then got him convicted. He's already serving his state sentence. And now that the danger is gone and all the complex investigations that were done by the detectives for this local police department are completed, The FBI comes in and goes, oh, you got guns? Hmm. We'll just indict him and then get a conviction and a sentence while he's already incarcerated and not risking the public safety. And look, I'm not going to cry about him being in the pokey for an additional 12 years, but it doesn't say anything about the investigative prowess of the FBI that they took the actual file and a secondary tack on add on charge because he's a convicted felon who's not allowed to have a gun and said, well, we'll be sure to announce that and not tell you what he's actually in prison for to begin with, because then people start to ask questions of, wait, he raped someone and the FBI only got a gun charge? Oh, that'll give away the game. The FBI depends on pop culture, movie, TV shows to convince people that they're actually out there doing what FBI medium password strength tells them that they're doing, and that is chasing down rapists. Yeah, on some BS gun charges after the local police already got the rapist. They don't want you to know that. They just want you to read the headline, see the press release headline, look at our Twitter account, and then move on to the next thing and wave pom poms for us, Fat Boys Incorporated, FB1, premier, preeminent law enforcement agency for the country. Make sure that you give an FBI agent a hug this National Police Week. Don't pay any attention to the actual cops that are doing the actual job. All right. Now let's go to Pennsylvania, guys. Western District of Pennsylvania for the next one here. Wilkinsburg resident sentenced following guilty plea for stealing another passenger during flight. Stealing from another passenger. Oh, they didn't steal the passenger. Sorry. So this is from the FBI Pittsburgh, and it's about theft on an airplane. Your person here, your person of interest, your subject, his name is Jamer Farrell. April 2025, Allegheny County Police Department called about an unruly passenger who was vaping on a Pittsburgh-bound flight from Los Angeles. So this guy was not only vaping, he was going through other passengers' luggage. So the stewardess, definitely call her a stewardess, not a flight progress coordinator. She winds up calling ahead and saying, hey, I got this guy doing some suspicious stuff. He's definitely not allowed to vape. Can we have police meet us at the gate? Which is exactly what happened, because upon arriving at Pittsburgh International Airport, he was taken into custody on an outstanding warrant because he was already wanted for other crimes. And then the Allegheny County Police developed further evidence of what he did, which was steal from people on the plane. He wound up being in possession of a backpack, having a wallet, debit card, credit cards of other passengers. So now he's committed a crime. Now, stealing on an airplane is a federal crime. You're crossing some state lines. I get it. And then there's this weird jurisdictional thing about the actual door on the airplane. If it's open and you commit a crime on the airplane, I believe the air marshals have to investigate. But if the door is closed, then the FBI, I mean, this is the nitty gritty that happens at a federal level where they're determining which agency has it. So because the crime happened on an airplane while it was in the air with a sealed door, it's technically the FBI's job to investigate the crime. But did they investigate it? No, Allegheny County Police did, because they met the bad guy at the door, got him into custody, searched him, found all the stolen stuff, and then after the fact, the FBI liaison, just reports to the airport and says, "Hey, job well done, guys. I'll make sure that we give you a thank you or two in the press release or the tweet that FBI Pittsburgh puts out when nobody's paying attention, a couple years from now, ultimately." All right, we got a bunch more to get to, guys. But before we do, I want to make sure that we do our one time per show reminder. If you haven't already and you're watching us here on Rumble or YouTube at AmRadPod, please, I beseech you, do give us a nice thumbs up, a follow, subscribe, drop a couple comments in there. And also, if you wouldn't mind, at some point today, if you haven't already this week, head on over to Spotify, give us a follow, 5-star review there, AmRadPod, the American Radicals podcast, and a play if you wouldn't mind. Just turn the volume down if you've already heard the content. Nothing behind a paywall. It'll just be a repeat, but it will help us to actually trick the algorithm into boosting us over at Spotify, which has reliably informed me that we are supposed to be getting a payout from pretty soon. So that's pretty exciting, as we've now transitioned from a amateur hobbyist podcast to the professional. Maybe we'll crack triple digits of a payout there. But again, guys, thank you as always. And I will schedule the commercial to run right about now. All right, let's move on and go out to the Western District of the State of Washington for the United States Attorney's press release here. And this is a very long press release. It involves a couple of bank robbers, guys who basically mess with ATMs so that when the tech gets out there, they can rob the tech who will open it up and they can steal the cash. And these guys, headline, by the way, first of two violent ATM bank robbers sentenced to 10 years in prison. These two guys, they're named Seth Coles Brody and Amon Hogg. So Seth and Amon, they go out on a whole bunch of these robbery schemes. So it starts back in 2024. They were in Washington State and they manipulate, mess with three different ATMs. They try to rob one of the guys who's out there to repair it, and he runs away. The next day, they get another technician and they steal some money from him. And then they tried to mess with the third one, but it didn't really work. And then they leave the area. They haven't been caught, so they're on the lam. They head on down to Phoenix, Arizona, and do the exact same thing. They were actually stopped by local law enforcement while attempting to rob an ATM that they had disabled. And we don't get any information about whether or not they were actually charged with a crime, but I presume that they weren't, because within a month, they were back at it again, where they were again back in Washington State. You have Seth and Amon. They commit another robbery at a Bank of America in Redmond, Washington. A few days later, stopped by U.S. Border Patrol, I believe at the northern border, with over $200,000 in cash. The cash was seized, but they were allowed to leave because Border Patrol, I guess, didn't think that was suspicious. So they just did a civil asset forfeiture, took $200,000 from them, and let the bank robbers go. A couple months later or two, they commit another robbery, this time in Texas. In Houston, they stole over $100,000. 1 month later, they got in Oregon, disabled some ATMs there, a couple different locations. While in the area, they robbed a customer at an ATM. And finally, they go to Maine. So we're in the West Coast, Southwest, and now to the Northeast into Maine in June, and they disable again yet another ATM and rob it. The men left Maine, drove across the country to Mississippi in the deep South, where they were arrested. Congratulations, FBI. You did an awesome job. You tracked them down. They were in Washington and Arizona and Texas and back to Washington and then over in Maine, and you got them arrested in Mississippi. No, they were arrested at a traffic stop, because it's always just patrol. It's the two words, right? If you're a patrolman and they say, what do you do for a living for the police department? Well, I'm just patrol. It's a cliche. Just patrol always gets the arrests. The Oklahoma City bomber, Timothy McVeigh, was stopped by just patrol because they're doing some traffic, because the bad guys are worried about what they just did. They don't pay attention to the speeding signs, or they have a broken tail light, or they don't use a turn signal, and just patrolman pulls them over, which is exactly, again, what happened here to our two bad guys who did multiple bank robberies in a whole bunch of states all across the country, and traffic stop in Jackson, Mississippi, arrested, and at the scene, they had a stolen gun and a whole bunch of cash that wound up being civil asset forfeited to the local police there. But now the feds come in because they were unable to track down these guys, allowed them to almost flee the border, flee the confines of the country, never had their hands on them, and it was up to a local cop in Mississippi to actually get it done. All right, let's stay out in Washington for the next one. Headline from the Eastern District of Washington press release: registered sex offender sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for child pornography offense. FBI, Seattle. Stephen Eric Prestwood, April 2025, Spokane County Sheriff's Office received multiple tips from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children regarding uploads of child sexual abuse material linked to an online message account associated with this dude, Stephen Prestwood. Law enforcement officers, meaning Deputies with the Spokane County Sheriff's Office arrested him, seized his cell phone. They examined it. They found all this child pornography on it. And then the detectives determined that hundreds of the images and videos had previously been identified by NCMEC and were linked to numerous known child victims. So, why am I bringing this up? Because I want to go back over this. I've done it a couple of times, but this is a massive fraud that is being carried out by the FBI and specifically FBI Director Medium Password Strength Kash Patel. What happened here? Spokane County deputies, probably detectives within their Internet Crimes Unit, get a tip from NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, professionals who view child pornography all day long. They watch it so much that they know these historical CSAM videos or photos. They know it because they say, oh, yeah, we've seen that before. It's a known series, as it's called. And we will give a pseudonym to the little girl who's being abused in the photos and the video. She'll be little Susie. And then, because NCMEC is uber competent at what it does, it'll aggregate a bunch of information from, say, a Facebook or an Instagram or one of these big tech companies and say, hey, look, here's the IP address, here's the account information, and NCMEC takes it and hands it off to law enforcement. Okay? So then it goes into a dashboard. Law enforcement can view it, can get the report from NCMEC and find out who the likely person is, who owns the account, who's been posting it, their IP address, their location, their financial information, and then you're off and running. It's just paint by numbers at this point. It's pretty quick to go forth and get an arrest warrant for somebody. And NCMEC is so reliable that if you go to a prosecutor, they will just say, oh, NCMEC, they said that it's child pornography. Yeah, that's good. You don't need to watch it. You don't need to give me a description. NCMEC is the gold standard, which is exactly what happened. And the local deputies go forth and get our bad guy. FBI Seattle didn't do anything. And the last thing, did you catch it? This is the located children lie, the fraud that we get from the FBI, from FBI Director Medium Password Strength. Investigators determined that hundreds of the images and videos had previously been identified by NCMEC and were linked to numerous known child victims. Those are the located children that Kash Patel likes to brag about. They tell you in the press release that NCMEC did the work. FBI doesn't locate the children. If they did, do you think medium password strength FBI Director Kash Patel would not miss the opportunity to have a photograph of himself with just one of those kids? Because they're not actually reuniting families. It's a lie, as is everything that we're seeing from all of these press releases. The FBI is not integral to this whatsoever. The local deputies in Spokane did everything. There's no reason why they can't bring this case, bring the file to a federal prosecutor and put this piece of trash in prison for the rest of his life. Now let's go to New York, guys. And I said, I think I've got another handful of them to go. We are grinding them out here. We're going to try to get through them all because it's a Friday. Why not? And this comes from, again, the Southern District of New York, the crown jewel within all United States attorneys' offices within the Department of Justice. Headline, 3 men charged with attempted smuggling of 89 firearms. Wow, we got some guns. We got some smuggling. This sounds like something the FBI would be all over. You have 3 guys here. Their names are Malik Bromfield, Faizan Ali, and Kamal Salman. Durga. This just happened, actually. May 7th, 2026, personnel with the New York State Police initiated a traffic stop on a Ford Explorer after observing the vehicle commit traffic violations. Just patrol for the win. The troopers wound up talking to the occupants of the vehicle, these 3 dudes, and they were very evasive and giving some inconsistent statements. So they wind up questioning them and asking for permission to search the car. And also, one of these guys gave consent to have himself searched, and he wound up having a Pakistani national driving permit hidden in his buttocks. So I guess he gave full consent. And this is what they find, though. Picture here, if you happen to be watching us on Rumble, YouTube, or later on Spotify, they find all of these guns hidden in a purple suitcase on the back seat, and actually some other guns secreted underneath one of the seats in the back. 89 guns discovered by New York State Police. The troopers do it all. And they actually had permission to search the vehicle because their canine, not an FBI canine, the New York State Police canine alerted on the vehicle, and that gave them the probable cause to conduct the search. FBI not involved at all. These guys were trying to go to Canada, so there's an international angle to it that might necessitate a federal law enforcement presence, but it certainly doesn't justify a headline or a tweet from FBI New York about how they're saving America from some gun traffickers, when in fact it was a New York State Police, some troopers out there just patrol doing their jobs. And I got this one now because that one was pretty high profile. It was like, about a week or so ago. But this one was a really high profile case from a couple of years ago. And I don't know why it needed to be investigated at all. Here it is from Baltimore. Does everybody remember how the bridge collapsed in Baltimore because a boat hit it a couple of years ago? Yeah, it's related to that. Headline from the U.S. Department of Justice, Maine DOJ, foreign operators and technical superintendent of MV Dolly indicted for roles in key bridge crash. Now, this again is an extremely long press release. I'll even start scrolling through it so you can see just how excited they were to announce this indictment from the FBI Maine Justice. But essentially, what it boils down to is that the boat crashes into the bridge collapses, and a few people actually died. It was fortunately early enough in the morning that there weren't very many people on the bridge, but it's still tragic nonetheless. But what we want to cover down on today, 2 companies and 1 individual have been indicted. The 2 companies, Synergy Marine is in Singapore, and then Synergy Maritime is in India. They've been indicted. So foreign corporations that won't go to jail because they're corporations. And then you have this other national. He's an Indian national. His name is unpronounceable, but I will try. Radhakarishanan Kartrik Nair Durga. He's been indicted, except he's in India. So are we going to extradite him? He's been charged with willfully failing to immediately inform the U.S. Coast Guard of a known hazardous condition and obstruction of an official proceeding and false statements. So they got him for 1001, the lowest hanging fruit possible. It's the lowest hanging felony that the Department of Justice and the FBI love to threaten people with, and they use it as a plea bargain deal. Say, hey, look, I don't want to go through a trial with you. We might win, we might lose. How about you just plead guilty to false statements to a federal officer? And they do. They're never going to get a plea. This dude's hiding out in India, and India is not going to extradite him. So after a multiple year investigation, I believe 26 months of assigning federal prosecutors and special agents and supervisors to do all the necessary legwork to bring forth this case and get an indictment, they got it. And they got what they really wanted out of it: a press release and a tweet. And everybody can wave pom-poms and hand out helmet stickers and say just how awesome they are. All right, 1 more press release, and then I want to dig into one final thing. So 2 more agenda items today on the American Radicals podcast, guys. And this one is pretty egregious, and it actually, I find tremendously offensive and disturbing. The headline from the District of Massachusetts, United States Attorney's Office: Puerto Rican man pleads guilty to damaging aircraft. What went down here from the FBI Boston field office? You were quote unquote bad guy, Angel Luis Morales Torres. Last year, January 2025, he was a passenger aboard a JetBlue flight scheduled to fly from Boston to Puerto Rico. While the aircraft was on the taxiway preparing for takeoff, Morales stood up from his seat, ran down the aisle, and entered an empty emergency exit row where he began attempting to open the emergency exit door. A flight attendant attempted to restrain him. He was eventually tackled by another passenger, but prior to being restrained, he managed to open the emergency door, causing the inflatable slide to deploy and rendering the aircraft inoperable. He faces a 20-year prison sentence and a $250,000 fine. What actually went on here? And this is my strong suspicion, and I've confirmed it with conversations with federal air marshals, one of which being Sonia Labasco, fellow suspendable. Unquestionably, what happened here with this guy Morales. The plane was taxiing. It was not off the ground. So he was trying to bring down the airplane, Steve. Don't you want the terrorists to get away with it? No. Mr. Morales had a mental break due to claustrophobia, which is not infrequent on aircrafts. I'm friends with some FAMs, some federal air marshals. This is actually pretty common. People freak out. They're in a metal tube and they will do anything, anything. We covered a story a couple of years ago about a guy saying, I have a bomb on the plane just because he was so desperate to get off the plane. They will say whatever they have to say. They will do whatever they have to do to just get fresh air because they're freaking out, man. So what happened with this guy? He had a mental break. Yeah. The flight was disrupted. Yeah. They're going to have to get a new plane. It inconvenienced the entire plane of people. Does he deserve to go to prison for 2 decades? Does he deserve to go to prison at all? He needs help. You know, one of the things you do when you go into law enforcement, they ask you, why do you want to be a cop? Well, yeah, I want to put bad guys in jail. I want to help people. This is not helping him. Being somebody who actually did have a bout of claustrophobia on one occasion, never had it before, never had it since. I put on the weapons of mass destruction. I donned the suit. It was a SWAT training thing. And I went to the instructors and said, dude, I'm freaking out right now. You have to get this helmet off of me. Was I going to go full postal? I mean, I didn't have live ammunition, so I don't know. I doubt it. But I can definitely empathize with what that guy was experiencing. We don't know if this is a long-term illness that he has. We don't know if it was a one-off incident. But what we do know is that the FBI came in after the fact when a guy had a mental health crisis suffering from claustrophobia and is now spiking the football and putting him in a cage for the next 20 years. Utterly deplorable and disgusting. And speaking of disgusting and deplorable, I want to finish off the day. And this isn't a press release, but it's going to be more of an itemized list of things that I want to go through. So the FBI director, Media and Pass from Strength, is going out there trying to ask for more money, right? And trying to protect his image and say just how awesome things are. So he's been pumping up this thing to try to get dad's approval and saying how successful the FBI has been under the Trump Part 2 administration, which has now been in office for what, like 16 months? So here's the graphic that FBI Director Media and Pastor Strength Kash Patel has been touting, and this comes from his actual Twitter page. And there's a bunch of itemized matters here. Let's see how many of them we can actually flow through and determine, you know, what actually is and is not true. So 20% drop in nationwide murder rate. Well, we know from a fact that major police departments around the country are not reporting crime to the FBI. And secondly, the FBI has nothing to do with murder. 45,500 plus violent crime arrests, up 184%. Two things. Most of those are illegal aliens being apprehended by ICE. And secondly, up 184% from what, sir? You've been in office for 16 months. Does it mean the prior 16 months? What's your baseline that you're actually using to derive 184% from? Is it from last year or the year prior? Because it's 16 months to 12 months. It's not apples to apples. I'm going to need to see your math on that, FBI Director, Media and Password Strength, Kash Patel. Next one, 2,500 gangs and criminal enterprises disrupted, up 322%. Disruptions are arrests. It's just secondly counting the exact same thing. And we know that the violent crime that is being arrested is mostly by ICE of illegal aliens who they're saying are in gangs. So again, we're not doing anything. Then he brags about seizing a bunch of fentanyl, which I thought Kash Patel went over to China and stopped fentanyl from happening whatsoever, but yet he's going to brag about it. 6,940 plus child victims located. We've already talked about it. Child victims located. You didn't do any of it. So you want us to believe, sir, that you located 6,940 plus. Does that mean 6,941? I mean, that's an oddly specific number to then have a plus sign from. But again, you're retarded. Almost 7,000 child victims have been located in 16 months, and we've never seen one photograph of one of them because it's a lie. 2,900 child predators and human traffickers arrested. How many of those were arrested by local cops? We've identified a bunch of them today. 113 counterintelligence arrests, up 53%. Counterintelligence investigations take years, which means that you just told them to go forth and arrest them. 849 plus, so 850 individuals disrupted from conducting terrorist attacks. How many playbook cases have we gone over on the American Radicals podcast? Increasingly, we're seeing them being online trolls who get child porn. We're calling them nihilistic violent extremists. And now we're going to find out that Seb Gorka says he doesn't like Tucker Carlson, so let's go arrest him for being a terrorist. 158% increase in cyber-related indictments. Indictments, not arrests, because what the FBI is doing is indicting Russians who are doing cyber crimes when they're in Russia and will never be arrested. 8 of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives captured, twice as many as 4 years under the Biden administration. Well done, except the FBI top 10 most wanted is a complete scam. It's a complete PR scheme. At one of these, the FBI claimed that they arrested the person was put on the list 73 minutes before they were apprehended. Do you think that they're that good? Of course not. They knew the person, they knew where they were, they had already arranged to have them arrested, and then an hour and 13 minutes before the arrest happened, they put them on the list just so that they could go and announce how they got a top 10. Another person was just recently arrested who had been on the list for like 4 hours. They're setting them up like bowling pins so they can knock them down and claim credit. So I have now discounted every single bullet point from the FBI Director, Media and Pass Restraint Kash Patel's sanctimonious online statements that he's making about just how much crushing of the crime that the FBI has done under his leadership, or lack thereof. We don't need an FBI at all. We certainly don't need an FBI Director, Media and Pass Restraint at the helm of a premier, preeminent law enforcement agency that is asking for an additional $1 billion. They're going from 11 and they want $12 billion in next year's fiscal budget, guys. Don't need it. We have robust, competent law enforcement in this country at a local, municipal, county, state level. Every single example I gave you today on the roundup here, and I went through like 13 or 14 examples, were local cops doing the job that the FBI then claimed credit for. So why don't we just leave it to them? This National Police Week, I think the best thing that we could do is actually honor the police and not just give them the credit, but give them the actual responsibility. Let's make it possible for these guys to do what they're already doing and enhance it. Say, hey, you know what? You're wearing a badge. It doesn't have to be a tiny but shiny that Kash Patel arranged to have put on his hip. It could be whatever agency that you're representing. You're doing an awesome job. There's nothing stopping you from walking into a United States Attorney's office with the case that you've already investigated and bringing forth some federal charges. That's the way out of this. We have perfectly competent and capable and aggressive law enforcement that is out there protecting their communities against fraud and force as they're duty bound to, as their oath requires them to. And they're doing a thankless task. And they're not asking for the credit. The FBI, on the other hand, that's all they care about. So we've reached the end, guys, of the press release extravaganza. We've reached the end of the week, but I do have a nice palate cleanse that I want to get to today. And in keeping with our theme of this National Police Week, this comes from Florida, over the Tampa area, Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, where they used a canine and they wound up rescuing an elderly man who was lost in the woods.
Hey, Booms.
Hey, buddy.
Ooh. Find him. Hey, he's right here. Hey, I found him in the woods. Ray, you okay?
We're about a minute
Good
out.
boy. Good boy, Boomer. Good boy, Boomer.
This is Dad. Ray Fournette. 2 hours ago.
Real first responders doing the job. Pretty cool. All right, guys. That's it for the week. That's it for the day. Appreciate you as always. If you haven't already, reminder, give us a nice thumbs up, follow, subscribe on YouTube and Rumble. We will be back with you next week, Monday, noontime. And until then, have a great weekend.
You've been listening to the American Radicals Podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRad.